This slide deck is going to take you through some tips and instructions for preparing your storyboard and your script for the video project. I'll also go through a few things on the basic shot types and when you want to use different shots, and also a couple of exporting tips. So let's get going on this. Planning your storyboard, it's going to seem like you're likely to feel like you're putting so much time into planning the storyboard, but I guarantee you the time is going to come back to you if you really plan your storyboard well, if you make it specific, if you have it organized, because in this project, you've probably been thinking about it already a lot, and so you've got this visual video playing in your head where you kind of know how you want it to go. But when you go to shoot your video, you're going to be the director, you're going to be the camera person, the lighting person, the props person. You've got all these jobs to do. And it's going to be very difficult for you to manage all that and keep in mind exactly what you want to shoot if you don't have a good planning document to help you along the way, and that's the storyboard. And so the better you can make that storyboard, the better you can visualize the way the entire film is going to go in advance. The more detailed you make it, the better your shooting's going to go. I guarantee it. Change your scenes very frequently to try to keep your video very visually interesting. Our visual systems are kind of hardwired to detect change in the visual environment. And so when we are looking at a screen, that's a very static environment. But when things change frequently on that screen, that does reorient our attention. And that's really one of the big purposes of changing scenes and cuts in video. Look at commercial videos sometime. A basic 30-second commercial on average has about 14 cuts in it. And so that's a cut about every 2 seconds. Even though that commercial may only have 4 or 5 or 6 scenes in it, it's likely to have multiple cuts within that scene. And at each cut, the camera changes the visual perspective, the angle, the focal length, and all of that helps reorient the viewer's attention to what's going on in your frame, and that's what you want to do. 10 seconds is a really, really long scene. So if you're doing a 2-minute video, you're probably going to have 15 to 20 scenes in that video. So just prepare for that, and the more you organize this, the better off you are. Now, let's say you've got a 10-second scene and you're going to have where somebody is talking to another person, and you're going to have 2 or 3 cuts in there. What that means is you're going to have to film that scene multiple times from each perspective that you want to do the cut. So you're going to do multiple takes of that, where your actors are going to say the lines the same way while you film it from different perspectives. Now, if you have 2 or 3 cameras available to you, you can get that all at once. But in most cases, you are not likely to have that. So you're going to have to take multiple cuts, and then you will stitch those together in the editing process. Okay, so what do you include in your storyboard? There are a number of things. There are lots of different templates out there. I have put one on Canvas for you, the COMM 317 storyboard template that you can download and use. However, if you've used other templates in the past and you have something you like to use, that's fine. But I do want everyone to include something that may not be on some of the templates that you find online. And what I want you to include is production notes. Production notes at the beginning of your storyboard. And basically, if you think of a storyboard as kind of a list of directions or kind of like a recipe, right? When you look at a recipe, the list of ingredients is the first thing that you usually see in a recipe. That's what the production notes are. Your scenes in a storyboard, those are the step-by-step directions for for cooking this dish or putting that recipe together. But the production notes are your list of ingredients. And so I want you to have that. That's going to be a list of all your props. That's going to be a description of the scenes that you're going to be shooting in, a description of your talent, what they look like, any audio files that you're going to bring in, such as your secondary music track or sound effects. All of the stuff that you need to have on hand to complete this video project should be listed in your production notes. Okay, next, you're going to have video directions and audio directions, and they're usually just like videos on top and audios right below that. So your video directions should include the type of shot that you are using, a close-up, a medium shot, whatever. Also, how you got to that scene, usually a cut, so it might say, cut to medium shot of your talent. Right? Could be a dissolve, but you want to include how you got into that scene. And then also a brief description of what's happening in that scene. Just a few words to describe the basic action that's going on. Any camera movements that you are using, a dolly, a truck, a pan shot, anything like that. And then also the length of the scene in seconds. And it's important to synchronize or calibrate the length of the scene with the audio directions. So if you have somebody who is speaking, whether it's a voiceover or on camera, you want to make sure that the amount of time it takes them to complete their lines is appropriate for the amount of time that you've kind of designated for the scene. Okay, that's really important in commercial advertisements that are pegged to have to be a very, very specific length, but it's good practice for you even on other videos to kind of help you monitor your scene time and make sure that that you're allocating enough time for your talent to speak it. Easiest way to do that is to simply practice and rehearse, get a timer, say the lines, and you'll know how many seconds that scene should really be. And then that helps you figure out then what kind of movements and cuts are going on in that length of time. So your audio directions should include any spoken language, whether that's your on-camera talent or a voiceover, which is designated as VO, as well as any music or sound effects that you're using. Now, if you have somebody speaking in a scene, but there's music when the scene begins, what you're going to do is then have to bring the music down. And so you'd include in their directions about music fades out, music goes up in the next scene, things of that nature. Okay, so drawing your sketches. These do not have to be beautiful artwork or anything like that, but I would like you to try to make them detailed enough so that when you print these out, and you should, or at least have them on a big enough tablet or something that you can see each scene clearly, so that you can look at that scene when you're getting ready to shoot, and it's going to give you enough detail to help you get your camera in the right position, at the right distance, at the right angle, and all of that kind of stuff, because that is the kind of thing that is very difficult to remember when you're trying to deal with all the stuff that you're dealing with during the shoot. Okay, so do make sure that if you are indicating a close-up shot, like in this, the second frame, that you are actually giving a close-up in your sketch. Okay, so when you're shooting outdoors, you want to, you've got natural light in most cases, unless it's at night. You want to have your subject kind of with the light on their face and things of that. Most of you already know that. But some of you will be shooting indoors, and that presents some extra challenges. So let's talk about that for a minute. Indoors, close-ups are just as important as they are outdoors. But when you're indoors, you'll likely feel like you're already closer to your subject than you are. And let's say you're shooting this video with your phone. you'll look through your phone and think you're close enough, but you might not be. So you've got to kind of practice this a little bit. If your scene directions call for a close-up, you need to make sure that you physically get close enough to your subject so that you've got that shot, and that you aren't too far away. It's much easier to kind of stay back and stay too far away when you're doing an indoor shot, because when you get close to your subject, you almost feel like you're kind of invading their space. You are, and get over it. Pay attention to your lighting. Lighting indoors is difficult, and this is not this is not an advanced video class where we're going to get in depth into lighting. Most of you don't have studio lights or the ability to set up three-point lighting and things like that. But you do want to make sure that your subjects are well lit and that we're able to see them. And so you want to make sure that they don't have their back to an open window, or in the daylight where they're going to be backlit or even in silhouette. You want to make sure that you've got plenty of light on their faces. So you might have to kind of rearrange, get some extra lamps and things like that. Really kind of try to flood your shooting area with as much light as you can. Now, if you put a lot of light in there and it's coming from different angles, you may have shadows, and we're not going to really worry about shadows too much in this, but I do want you to get your subjects well lit. One way of kind of mitigating the shadows is by not having your subject real close to a wall. Get rid of background distractions. I see this all the time in student videos. And I think it's a case of, if you're shooting something that's inside your home, you don't necessarily notice the distractions because they are there all the time. But while you're shooting, you want to make sure that there's not a lot of stuff that's unimportant that's going to be diverting your viewer's attention. So before you start your shots, kind of clean up the area behind, get rid of clutter, those kinds of things. Just look for things that are likely to be distracting. And you'll have to kind of like step outside your familiarity with your own space and kind of look at it as if you are somebody new and try to get rid of some of the distractions. If you're shooting in kitchens or bathrooms, these are particularly problematic. You'll see clutter on the counters, dishes in the sink, makeup stuff left on the bathroom counter. And if you're shooting in a bathroom, you've also got mirrors to deal with and things like that. So just really kind of take your time, think it through, and think of everything that's in your shot. And if it's not supposed to be in that shot, get rid of it. Okay, shoot faces, not backs. Faces are what hold attention. We really look at people's eyes. We look at their face because we can get the emotions that they are conveying. We also look at their lips when they're speaking. I think a lot of us realized during COVID that when people are masked up, it's often a little bit harder to understand what they're saying. And that's because we're not seeing their lips move. So shoot faces. Now, let's say you're doing some kind of a recipe video and the person's cooking at the stove. How are you going to get their face? You may not be able to get behind the stove because that's probably against the wall. So you might have to get creative. Maybe you have to actually lie on the counter next to it and then hold your camera at the back of the stove looking up to the person who is speaking. Or maybe you need to have your on-camera talent stopping and turning toward the camera so that they're speaking into the camera, not just speaking out into the air while they're looking away from the camera. Shoot faces. You want to see a lot of good face shots in these videos. Shoot horizontal, not vertical. It's easy to forget, especially if you shoot photos and videos a lot that you put on social media. A lot of those are in vertical format. This assignment needs to be horizontal. It's just, and if you do have a key scene that you shot vertically or square, there may be some ways in editing that you can rescale it and try to make it horizontal, but it usually doesn't look very good. So just really try to remind yourself, shoot horizontal all the time. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some camera shots. And remember that no matter how well you plan it, there are things that are going to go wrong when you do your shooting, so you'll have to improvise some. Just be aware of that, and it will help those little snafus probably go a little bit better. All right, let's talk a little bit about the different basic camera shots. These two shots you see here are what are known as establishing shots or extreme long shots. The purpose of a shot like that is they're usually at the very beginning of a scene or at the very beginning of the video, and the purpose is simply to establish location. Do you need to have that? Only if the location is important. So that's something you kind of have to think about. But if you're using an establishing shot, that's its purpose. It's to establish where the action is taking place. Okay, so the next kind of shot, when you have subjects or people usually in them, the next kind of shot, this one on the left, is what's called a long shot. Now, a long shot has the full body in view with a little bit of a buffer at the top and the bottom. And so you can see that while vertically your person is taking up most of the space of the frame, horizontally they're not taking up very much. So what's the purpose of that shot? Well, it's not for dialogue, because we can't see that person's face very well. We can't read their emotions at all. The purpose of the long shot is to show somebody in an environment. See here in the background, we can see, the SUV, we can see the house, we can see this, it puts that person in a setting. That's the purpose of that shot. The other place where we see long shots are kind of action shots, where you've got somebody walking, running, sports, video, those kinds of things. Because if somebody's moving horizontally and maybe moving very quickly, the long shot is an easier way to not just show the body movements in the action, but to actually keep them in frame. So that's the long shot. You probably won't have very many of those, or you shouldn't have very many of those unless you're doing a very action-oriented video where you've got people moving, running, dancing, walking, those kinds of things, and that's a big part of the video. This next shot is called the medium shot. Now notice here, it's cropped at the bottom, right about at the waist, and that's typical for a medium shot. And then still a little bit of buffer there. So now we're close enough, we can see his face a little bit. We can see that he's smiling, but we also still see some of the background, some of the environment. The medium shot is very good for kind of this interaction of a person in their environment. It's still not a very good shot for presenting on-screen dialogue. You're still a little too far away. These are the shots that you want to use for people speaking when they're on camera. The medium close-up on the left, the close-up on the right. These are the ones that convey the facial expressions, the emotions, where you can see the lips moving. The medium close-up is kind of framed by kind of cropping mid-chest and then with a little bit of buffer. And then contrast that with the close-up on the right, which is really kind of cropped just below the neck and then shows the face. And see how much real estate that face is taking up in that frame. This is a really, really good shot for someone communicating with the audience, whether they're communicating just with their facial expressions or with their audio and what they're speaking. The next set, the extreme close-up shot on the left. You might not have one of these. These are reserved for very high impact dramatic moments. There's often no sound. It's where we're really reading the eyes and looking for that flinch of the eye or what the person's looking at. And it's usually kind of the suspenseful moment, sometimes called the gunslinger shot. The cut in on the right there is a good kind of close-up that you can use when you want to focus on objects that that your talent is holding. Okay, the next couple of shots. This one on the left, where you've got the two subjects side by side, that's called a two-shot. You can actually even get 3 people in that. Notice it's a medium shot. It's cropped at about the waist, and then with a little room at the top above the head. We typically don't want to crop people's heads off and make it look like they've kind of had the slice at the top of their head cut. But this two-shot, this is good for having people side by side. Maybe 2 people are looking at something that's on the horizon. You could even get 3 people in one of these shots. Might have to back off just a little bit. But the two-shot is to get 2 people in frame on camera at the same time. Now, when you do have this kind of shot, you want to have your subjects pretty close together, because if you notice, like in this particular example, I would probably have those two young men stand even closer together, because the best real estate in that frame, the very center of the frame, we're seeing the background. So you do kind of have to think about composition in a two-shot that's a little bit differently than you do in some of the things where you have a single subject. The other one here is called an over-the-shoulder shot. That's really good for dialogue, but you kind of need 2 cameras. So if you have 2 people who are kind of talking back and forth in a scene, this is used in journalism videos a lot, where you've got the interviewer, the reporter, and the subject. And it's usually a 2-camera technique. If you're only doing it with 1 camera, you can still pull off this shot. You just have to do multiple takes where you shoot the entire scene, and then you go around behind the other person and you shoot the scene again and have them say the same lines, and then you put it together in editing. Okay, so speaking of editing, a few things to keep in mind, some do's and don'ts here. For your project instructions, I want you to work with some graphics so that you bring in some type into your video project. It doesn't have to be a lot, doesn't have to be elaborate, but I want you to kind of get that experience of working with some type. So include the title of your video. That's usually at the beginning part. Include your name and credits, who's acting in it. That can be at the end, the beginning, wherever you want, but typically you'll see the title at the beginning and then maybe some credits at the end. So do include some text in that, and so you'll have to do that in editing in Premiere Pro. Do include at least 1 additional audio track besides just the audio that you're capturing in camera. Typically that's going to be a music bed. For the purposes of this project, you can use any music you want to, but if you are using something that is copyrighted, you will likely not be able to place it on YouTube or some of the commercial hosting sites. Okay, so you're not using this video for commercial use, so it's fine for educational use, but if you do use popular music or something like that, you might not be able to place it on a hosting site. You could also include sound effects if you want to. Do export your video as an MP4. Now in Premiere Pro, when you go into the export media function and then you look at the pull down list of video format types, oddly enough you're not going to see MP4 as an export type. What you will see is H.264. And that is the main codec that is used for the MP4s. So just understand that you're looking for H.264. And then you'll also want to look to see what your file size is. And if you try to do high definition video, you're probably going to have a really, really big file. And so we do have a video on Canvas that shows you how to kind of reduce your bit rate to make a smaller file size. And we'll talk about that in class, but you do want to be cognizant of file size because these are going to be viewed on small laptops and things like that. It's not like a big screen home theater. You don't need high definition video for this project on your export. So the Premiere project file type, and it's got the .prproj. That's the file type that your Premiere Pro application creates. And so when you get ready to put your video together, you're going to have all of your clips together. You'll have located your music and sound effects and things like that. And then you open up Premiere Pro and you start to import this stuff. And so you'll import all the media that you're going to use. You're going to do your editing and get the video the way you like it. And then when you get ready to export it, you're going to save it as an MP4. You will also have a file that is this PRPROJ, the Premiere Pro project file. And that file it's really just a shell. So if you send me your Premiere Pro project file, if you look at the file size, it's going to be in kilobytes. You know, your MP4 is going to be in like 100 megabytes or something like that. So sending me the Premiere Pro project file is kind of like sending me a letter through the mail, if you remember letters in the mail. It's kind of like sending a letter through the mail without actually putting the letter inside it. It's a blank envelope. So that file doesn't do any of us any good. It's just your editing file. And do watch the video tutorial that we have online about reducing your bit rate to manage your file size on export. Okay, that's it for this video or in this slide deck. Hopefully this helps you kind of prepare how to put your storyboard together and gives you some things to think about in relation to the connection between the storyboard and the actual shooting that you're going to do.